Hello, we're back. This week I want you to do the same thing you did last week, which is look at the last page for the prompt. The prompt determines everything, basically, so you need to do that first. It says, do you believe that fairy tales are important? Read these two fairy tales to form your own opinion. Cite examples from these fairy tales to support your answers. So you can always come up with a knee-jerk answer, like yes. Because really, fairy tales are great. Who's going to say they're not important? Kids read them. They learn stories. They learn life lessons. I think they're great. But I will write down yes, understanding that maybe when I read the two fairy tales up here, that I might come across some no's. So be prepared for that. And maybe when you're marking up the text, choose to circle all the points in the story that prove yes and underline all the ones that prove no. And then you'll be able to figure out which essay will be easier to write. So let's try it. Excuse me, Rumpelstiltskin. Once there was a miller who was poor, but who had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened that he had to go and speak with the king, and in order to make himself appear more important, he said to him, I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold. Well, this part here, I'm going to underline it because that's a no. It makes fairy tales, it sets a bad example for kids when you lie, basically. So this shows me that no, fairy tales are bad. They're not that important. They set bad examples. The king said to the miller that it is an art which pleases me well. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace, and I will put her to the test. And when the girl was brought to him, he took her into the room, which was quite full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning early you have not spun this straw into gold, during the night you must die. Yikes, that's an underline. That's scary. You're going to threaten her because she didn't spin straw into gold. That's weird. Thereupon he himself locked up the room and left it alone. So there sat the poor miller's daughter, and for the life of her she could not tell what to do. She had no idea how straw could be spun into gold, and she grew more and more frightened until at last she began to weep. So we're going to pause, and normally you'd read the whole thing, but we're just doing a quick little video. You'd read the rest. He became more and more greedy. I already see that part. So that's getting an underline. These are bad example ones, like showing that fairy tales are bad examples for kids. So these are supporting no, fairy tales are not important. But let's read down at Rapunzel and see if we can find some yeses. Yes, fairy tales are important. And really, in my opinion, not writing this essay, I still think fairy tales are important. But I know I want to get a good score on this essay, so I'm going to find which one is easier for me to write. So Rapunzel. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. So if I'm religious, this part's a yes. Underline. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it, because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by the window and looking down. I'm going to highlight enchantress, who was dreaded by all the world, because it's good that kids know there's kind of like mean people in the world that people don't like. I think that's important at a young age to understand, like, there's going to be mean people. Just expect that. One day the woman was standing by the window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it, and she had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and as she knew that she could not get any of it, she quite pined away, and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed, and asked, What ails you, dear wife? She replied, If I eat some of If I can't eat some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind the house, I shall die. I'm underlining that, because that's being very dramatic. The man who loved her thought sooner than to let his wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself. Let it cost what it will. I'm going to underline that too. He's just going to steal and deal with the consequences later. I don't like that part. So that shows that fairy tales aren't important. They're actually bad. I don't really think that, but I'm just forming my case like I'm a lawyer. At twilight, he clambered down the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. We're going to go ahead and underline that. It tasted so good to her, so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. So, longing, greediness, these are all bad character traits. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden in the gloom of the evening. Therefore, he let himself down again, but when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. How can you dare, said she with an angry look, descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief. You shall suffer for it. So she's taking justice into her own hands. That's not good. Ah, answered he, let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it at a necessity. My wife saw your rampion from her window and felt such a longing for it. She would have died if we had not gotten some to eat. Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, if the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. I'm underlining this one. Switching children for what I think is lettuce. Let's synonym this and see if it has a synonym for rampion. Nope. I think it's lettuce. So we're going to pause there. You're still, you don't pause when you do the actual test. You read the whole selection. But I think from there I can come up with starting my outline. Remember, you have an introduction and a conclusion, and then in the middle, you're ideally coming up with 3 main topics. If you can't, what you want to do is come up with 2 strong topics in the middle, like very strong, like hit it out of the park, amazing strong. So my answer has to change to a no now, because I had more no things that show no, fairy tales are not important. Like I've said, though, I still believe they are. I just don't have enough evidence to support my answer. So I'm going to say no, they're not important. They set bad examples. We have the father lied to the king. The husband stole. And then what was the other thing? Oh, yeah, death. Lots of death. King kills. The lady was going to die. Wife die if no rampion. And I'm going to use the word rampion, not lettuce, because in the rubric it says you need to use the vocabulary from the story. And let's just say I don't want to do this last paragraph. I can decide not to, or maybe I could come up with another one like drama. The lady was going to die if she didn't get her rampion. So we take this and we put this down here. And when we read more, you can come up with your outline after having read one story. You can choose to do that. I do encourage you to go back and reread the stories a couple times, because you have 120 minutes. That's 2 hours. If you used half an hour for reading, even if you used 45 minutes for reading the story, you're still giving yourself an hour and 15 minutes to write your essay. So the thing is, you want to show them you understood both stories. You don't want to read it real fast and report some wrong things in your own essay. That would prove to everybody who's reading your essay that you did not understand what you read. So please, if you have the opportunity to reread, go back and reread the stories a couple times. hopefully that helps. We're going to have you underline some stuff in the next couple screens.